You take a guy that spent 4 years with no college experience, that spent 4 years in a special operations community. They don't need 4 years of college to know how to motivate, to lead, to inspire people, and to organize things so that they succeed. To take a group of individuals, form a team, give them common goals, and point them in the right direction to make them succeed. It's huge. I think every person, regardless of where they served, has that ability. They just need to tap into it.
I'm Marine veteran Pat Keplinger, and this is the Everyday Veteran Podcast. Our mission is to educate, motivate, and inspire you, the everyday veteran, to live your best life post-military service. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Everyday Veteran Podcast. I'm your host, Marine Corps veteran Pat Keplinger, and with me tonight, retired Navy SEAL Rick Winters. Rick, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and in your military career and how you got in?
Well, I graduated high school, barely, with not a lot of purpose or direction. But I knew that I wanted to be in the medical profession. So I went down to my local Marine Corps recruiter because I thought their uniforms were the snappiest. And I had family members that were in the Marines and tried to sign up. So, and I gave them, this is what I want to do. They said, well, we don't really have that program, but you can go into the Navy and you can, basically be a Marine as a medic. I said, well, that's perfect. So I walked next door. I was literally right next door to the Navy recruiter and signed up. And said, this is what I want to do. I went into Navy boot camp in 1985. And during boot camp, they had a kind of a recruitment day in terms of specialties and things that you could do. And one of the things was naval special warfare. So we spent a whole day going through these SEAL indoctrination programs, physical fitness tests and things like that. And I excelled pretty well. So they kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, what are your aspirations? I said, well, I want to be I want to go to med school. I want to be a doctor. And I said, well, why do you want to work in a hospital? You could be a doctor in the field and be a special guy, with the SEAL team. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds good. They showed this pretty cool video called Men with Green Faces, which was kind of the recruitment video at the time. And that was right up my alley, to be honest with you. It was like, outdoors, doing high speed stuff and being part of a special unit. So I signed on the dotted line. And I went to Corpsman A School after boot camp. And then from there, I reported to Coronado Island for BUDS training.
And so you must have been in pretty decent shape. Did you play sports in high school or were you prepared for?
I did. I swam, I surfed. I spent a few years in Santa Barbara living on the beach. I played football. My family played baseball. I was never really good enough to play baseball. I just like to hit shit. But anyway, I was a decent athlete. I wouldn't consider myself, anywhere in the elite category for, by any means. But I was in good shape, and I was excited about the opportunity and the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Where are you from originally? Where do you call home?
The Sacramento area. So currently I live in Roseville. I went to high school in this general area in a place called Carmichael. And I moved back after I left the Navy.
Mm-hmm. So graduated boot camp, you went to Corps school or Corpsman school, and then BUDS training. Tell us a little bit about that and what that was like for you.
Shock and awe. to be honest. It was it's one of the most memorable parts of my life, I think. Even thinking back on it now, the camaraderie, the lessons learned, even, the punishment, it all had a purpose. It had a meaning. It made sense to me. And I really embraced it. I enjoyed every bit of it, even all the numerous times, and I'm sure we all went through it. All my buddies and I have talked about it. The amount of times that we actually, wanted to quit, wanted to crawl out of the surf zone and ring the bell, but we didn't, or our buddies kept us from doing it. Mm-hmm. So we all had those challenges during that time frame. But it was really it was a unique experience to challenge yourself beyond what you thought you were capable of doing. And I really loved it. I really had a great time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I couldn't wait for it to be over. Don't get me wrong. But, you really felt a sense of extreme accomplishment when you graduated BUDS.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember how many you started with and then how many finished?
Roughly. I think I was in BUDS class 140. We started with about, I think, 129 or 130 guys. And we graduated somewhere around 30 individuals at that point. Yeah, at the end. So we had a pretty high attrition rate. BUDS classes, it's up and down. I've known classes that graduated 8 guys.
Wow.
So it was tough, but I mean, it averages out overall.
And how long is BUDS training?
Well, back when I went through, it's different. The program is different now, but back when I went through, BUDS was 6 months. So you went to 6 months of training. The medics, upon graduation, went to specialty training for dive medicine, and then you went to your SEAL team, and then you went into 6 months of what they now call SQT, which is we called it STT back then, SEAL Tactical Training. It's kind of your advanced training once you leave BUDS before you're assigned a platoon and become deployable.
Mm-hmm. And can you share what SEAL team you were part of?
I served on 4 different SEAL teams. So I originally, after BUDS, I went to SOC Med School, which was dive medicine. And then I went to SDV school to learn how to fly the mini submarines. And then I was originally assigned to SDV Team 2 on the East Coast. I spent about 6 months there, and then I was transferred to SEAL Team 4. They were in need of medics at the time because of some operations that were going on. And so I was transferred to SEAL Team 4. I spent several years at SEAL Team 4, and then I went to the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Some people know it under a different acronym these days. I spent a few years there, and then I finished my career up at SEAL Team 1.
And that's what's behind you right now? Is that SEAL Team 1?
Well, that's my trident, and those are plaques from Red Team, the development group, from SEAL Team 4 and from SEAL Team 1.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So how long were you in the Navy, in the Navy SEAL? How many years?
Total, I was in there about 14 years.
And then, so you retired. Tell me a little bit about that, if it was a decision to transfer out or to retire, or what that looked like for you.
So when I was at the development group, I had a series of training accidents. I had a pretty high-speed parachute accident, free fall accident. And during my downtime, getting surgeries over the course of about a year, I went to an advanced medical school called Independent Duty Corpsman. I had two options, either to go to the Army Goat Lab in Fort Sam Houston at the time, or go to San Diego and go to independent duty corpsman school. So I went to San Diego because I wanted to stay with the community. So I went there for a year to rehab, to get the surgeries done and get fixed up. And from there, I went to SEAL Team 1. I took over the assault phase at SEAL Team 1 as their training chief there. I spent about 3 years there, and then I had to have another surgery to repair my knee. When I came out of surgery, unfortunately, they said, you're done playing. So they started the process to do a PEB, a physical evaluation board. And the community fought hard. They asked me, how hard do you want to fight this? And I said, well, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay in the SEAL team. But at that time, it was pre 9/11, and there wasn't a lot of emphasis on keeping, wounded veterans, injured veterans, I should say, in the workforce. So I went through that process. I didn't fight it very hard, and decided, I'd spent 14 years there. I'd done a lot. I didn't know if I was ever going to be, completely operational again at that point. All the doctors said no. So, I probably shouldn't have listened to them, but I did. And at that point, I went with their decision and was medically retired at that point, discharged.
Had you had planned to stay in and retire full 20, or were you taking it one term at a time, or what did that look like for you when you first started planning this?
Well, back then, 20 years was kind of the max. I know guys right now that have done 30 and plus, and quite frankly, I'd still be doing it today if they would allow it. And I know every guy that's been in the teams would probably say the same thing if they were forced to leave, not on their own terms. It was the greatest experience of my life. It was the greatest community to work with. The best of the best in terms of brotherhood, leadership, camaraderie, accountability. So yeah, I'd still be doing it if I could, but I'm not. I'm 55 years old now, so you're not going to see any of us, doing that kind of work. And I get that. It's a young man's game. No, I didn't want to leave at the time. But it happened, and that's kind of where my transition into the civilian life starts.
Tell us a little bit about that transition. So when you go through a med board, there's a certain path, and they kind of send you through some classes, a lot like a regular transition, a little bit different, more catered towards injuries or things like that. But walk us through what that looked like for you in that transition phase.
The transition phase for me was very short. It consisted of about, if I remember correctly, a week or 2 weeks of out processing. And it wasn't unique to my community or what I did. It was just the Navy in general. So, the out processing class that I was in, it was all filled with, guys from the fleet who had skill sets that were more applicable to the civilian market than I did. Granted, I did have a lot of experience in medicine, which later to find out didn't apply to the civilian world. Even though I'd been through all these schools and had all this knowledge and experience, it didn't transfer over. So, or you take a guy that was in the regular Navy who was an aircraft mechanic or, was a welder or, whatever their skill set was, it was more applicable to the transition into the civilian workforce than mine was. So that was difficult in and of itself. It's changed a lot. I have to say that it has changed a lot since then. So when I got out, I really didn't have a direction on where to go or what to do. I got this little week class or 2-week class of in-doc on leaving the military, signing up with the VA, getting a new evaluation, and then going through, if I remember correctly, it was called vocational something or other. But Voc Rehab, there you go. So I met with a Voc Rehab counselor. The professions, the professions that they were wanting me to go into, one had absolutely zero impact and desire for me, and it just wasn't who I was, and anything that I had any passion about. So I pretty much abandoned that. And when I left, I left with no goals, no understanding, no purpose, and a great sense of depression.
It's interesting because it took how many months to start training in the Navy, go to Corps school, become a SEAL. If you add all that training time up to become a Navy SEAL, and then you get a week on the back end to learn how to become a civilian again. It's crazy how that happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make a lot of sense. And, your story, I think, is very common in terms of, not having a direction, not knowing where to go. And I think with a community like yours, where there's not a lot of Navy SEALs that are probably paving the way for you out, right? I mean, it's the teams are pretty small. Is that true?
Well, back then, like I said, it's different now than it was back then. Back then, there was still the cloak of silence, and we lived a fairly strict life of anonymity. People weren't writing books, they weren't doing workout videos, they weren't making movies or telling their stories. It just didn't happen. So, the opportunities in terms of, what you could do, what you could accomplish were pretty small. There were several guys that had gotten out and done some consulting work. They'd gone into the private sector as security consultants or things like that. Some had gone into the law enforcement profession, but there wasn't a clear and true pathway, I would say, back then. You pretty much, when your SEAL team career ended, it ended. And that was it, and you figured out what you wanted to do from there, whether it was sell insurance, buy real estate, or use whatever skill set that you had to make a living.
And what did you get into starting out?
Well, starting out, when I came back up to the Sacramento area. This is where my family was. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I spent about 6 or 8 months pretty much sitting at home, being depressed, going through the drinking routine, feeling sorry for myself. The Navy had moved on, the teams had moved on, and I wasn't a part of it anymore. So, I didn't have a whole lot of resources and outlets and people to reach out to at that point. My family owned a small business, flipping some real estate and doing things like that. So I helped them out a little bit. I did some alarm security, consulting, things like that. I did some private security work for 6 or 8 months. It just wasn't going anywhere. There was no, the SEAL team was my career. The Navy was my career. And looking forward, I didn't have a college education, and I really didn't again, as I said, even though I came out with a lot of medical experience, medical schooling, medical knowledge, they didn't transfer over to the civilian side. So I would have basically had to start over. I remember I went down to the Sacramento Blood Bank to apply for a job to take blood pressures and draw blood. Now, granted, here I am, at the time I had a paramedic certification. I was a combat trauma medic. I'd been through some of the, most high-speed field trauma medical schools that you could do, Goat Lab and Pig Lab, independent duty corpsman school. But they wouldn't even let me draw blood or take a blood pressure without going through a civilian certification for it. So at that point, I completely just got disheartened with the medical profession at that point. And I was kind of burned out on being a medic anyway. I had some issues that I was, dealing with regarding that. So, I didn't know, I didn't have a direction again. I didn't know where I was going to go. So I spent a few months toiling around, maybe a year. I really thought I might want to consider law enforcement, but I was worried about being denied because of my disability rating and my disabilities when I left the military. Again, back then in 2003, 2004, they still hadn't established the fact that, disabled veterans leaving the military still had a lot to offer, even with their disabilities, if given the chance. So,
yeah, it's, like I mentioned before, it's a common thing where, you have this goal, you have this aspiration, all of a sudden it's cut short, and it's hard to I think with my civilian friends, because kind of a similar story, but when you don't really know what you're going to do the next step, and then you have to kind of figure it out, it's tough. And then you've got a family to take care of, and you got to go to a new place. Like you said, the Navy, your SEAL buddies moved on without you. And I think that was hard for me, and I know it's hard for a lot of people that I've talked to, is that you do all these great things in the military, and you think, how are they going to survive without me? How is it going to go on? And then you leave those gates, and nobody blinks an eye.
Yeah.
And
no. And but at the same, and in there, just to add something to that, and I get exactly what you're saying, because I full-heartedly agree with that. As much as your community moves on, they're still there for you if you reach out. I never knew that for about 17 years because I completely abandoned my community. My SEAL friends, my teammates, I went off the grid. I just fell off the grid. I was like, well, look, they're off, hunting evil, and I'm not there with them, and I'm probably not anywhere near their thoughts. And it took, almost 2 decades for me to realize that wasn't the case. So they're there for you, but sometimes you have to reach out to them because they are busier than you are in your civilian world. So, you have to realize that while you may not be part of the cog in the machine that's still turning, you're still a memory, and you're still a part of that family. And they will embrace you as such. You just have to reach out, and you got to be patient.
So what did that look like when you, after 17 years reaching out, what made you contact your buddies?
Well, interestingly enough, I had a couple guys that, I was extremely close with. We kept in contact, but it was a handful of times over, 15, 16, 17 years. But the majority of the teammates that I served with, I didn't have any contact with. A couple of years ago, we had a 30-year anniversary for Operation Just Cause in Panama, and they did a reunion type thing to honor that event, and we all met. I was contacted out of the blue, by one of my closest friends and teammates, who I served with on that airfield that night, during that conflict, and I served with in 2 other SEAL teams afterward. So I flew back there, and I reunited with dozens of guys that I hadn't seen in 15, 16, 17 years. And it was like we just got back from deployment, spent the weekend with our spouses, and now we're reuniting in the team room, only we're 50 years old. So it was, for me, it was a unique experience to feel that bond again. And that's when I knew that, at least in my community, it never goes away. Unless you do something stupid to disavow yourself, you're always there. You're always part of the family. And I always knew that. I mean, we had reunions in the past. And, we saw these guys from the Vietnam era and some World War II guys that we all looked up to. And they all reminisced. But you really didn't realize that you have that close-knit family, that brotherhood. Until you figure it out and accept it, and come out of the shadows. Quite frankly, I moved up here to Sacramento, and to where I was from, and just kind of disappeared from the SEAL community. And I'm still fairly quiet, but I'm a lot more connected than I was before. And I know that's different now because of the time that these guys have spent downrange together over the last 20 years in conflict. And there are relationships that, again, whether one person's, still active or there's a handful of guys that aren't anymore, they're in contact with each other constantly. That's just, that's the uniqueness of military service. No matter what branch you're in, the men and women that you serve with are your family, and they will be forever. So, again, unless you do something egregious to, dishonor your unit, your team, your country, then you're always going to be a part of that. And I think every veteran should, if they don't, they should understand that and definitely reach out, because you're always going to be part of that community.
When you reconnected after 17 years, did you see anybody else that was having the same kind of issues of feeling disconnected and not wanting to reach out, or were you the only one? What did that look like?
Yeah. I had I spent a week back there, and I had so many conversations with so many guys that had gone through similar um, uh, situations, things, events. Um, the one thing that we all shared in common, though, was our ability to overcome that and to find a way forward. We shared those moments of despair, depression, uncertainty, but we relished in our accomplishments and things that guys are doing now and today with their life, even more. So, yeah, we definitely talked about, because every guy's separation is going to be different. I mean, even with some similarities, every individual is different, and how they respond, how they react, how they move forward. What motivates them, what drives them. And, again, it's just, it was invigorating for me. And at that point, I had gone through 15 years of law enforcement service and retired from law enforcement. I started my own business. So, I'd done a few things. But reliving those, those moments, those periods of the ups and downs, the things that you had to overcome. We all went through them, I think, for the most part. In different ways. Some guys, the transition was easy. I say the transition was easy, but the mental scars and the physical scars weren't. So, we all have our unique individual things that we got to deal with. And some guys deal with them differently. Some guys are scarred more than others, and some guys are just completely unfazed. But it's one big happy family.
Talking about those mental scars, is that something that is widely talked about within your community, or is it something that's kind of taboo and don't really go there? It is now.
It is now.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't when I left, for sure. Quite frankly, I don't think they recognized or realized it until a handful of years ago. The community itself has stepped up huge and done a lot to assist guys leaving in terms of recognizing those issues. There's a huge, there's a much greater separation evaluation that's done when they leave, from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, medical testing, psychological evaluation, peer counseling, mentorship. It runs the gamut. Quite honestly, the community and the military, special warfare in general, recognize that they had a huge investment in building these people to do a job that was very unique. And to just put them out on the street with physical and mental ailments
Mm-hmm.
might not be the greatest idea. So they have invested a huge amount of time, money, and effort in making the transition for those veterans much better.
Do the SEALs get a little bit extra, I don't want to say help or care, or just a little bit of extra attention because of the things that you guys have done and do when you're getting out in terms of the mental health side of it?
I don't know that I could really speak to that from the VA's perspective. I know the community does. The Naval Special Warfare community as a whole, and the UDT SEAL Foundation and Association has put a lot of effort, a lot of money towards making that transition seamless, and making sure that every guy that leaves the community is taken care of, and given all the resources and things that he needs when he leaves. Now, from a DoD perspective, I don't know that that's happened. To be honest with you, I don't go to the VA, and the reason I don't go to the VA is because it's such a pain in the ass. It's probably the reason there's a lot of veterans that don't go to the VA, and one of the reasons that we have, such a huge suicide rate amongst our veterans today. I think last statistic I heard was like 20 a day of guys taking their own lives. That's completely unsatisfactory. Whether our government and the Department of Defense is taking that seriously, I don't know. I'm not involved in that. I have seen some and heard some changes that are being made in the VA and in the transition period. I don't know how it goes with the other services, to be honest with you. But I know within the SEAL team, within the community, the Special Warfare community in the Navy, they are very unique in the ways that they do things, above and beyond what the military will do. So I'm sure the Marine Corps does the same thing, and the Army, within their special units, the Rangers and Green Berets and SF and things like that. Because of that tight knit brotherhood that you have. But that's probably above and beyond what, the federal government's willing to do, to be honest.
When you retired and you got out with a VA disability, you were already rated, and then you made a comment of you don't use the VA because it's a pain. What did you mean by that? What were some of the things that you went up against trying to use the VA?
Well, when I initially got out, I used the VA, and it wasn't bad. I went to the VA and I got my my final rating, because when the Navy put you out, they put you out on a certain rating, and it was basically the highest rating of your one combined individual injuries. So they put you out on that. Then you go to the VA and you get your final rating, and whatnot. So I did that. I went through, the VA process for about a year and a half, in the folk rehab and all that. Honestly, the red tape, the bureaucracy, the frustration, was just not worth it to me, to be honest, to deal with. And then, of course, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, as the global war on terror ensued, you're watching guys that are coming home that are really effed up. They're screwed up. physically and mentally. And I just never thought, even though I have a 90% rating, that I was even worthy of being in the line ahead of those people. So I had medical insurance. Because I'd gone into law enforcement, I just used that, and I figured, well, free up a slot for another vet.
Yeah.
To be honest, because appointments back then, it was 3, 4, 5 months to get to see somebody. It's not like, you can call up your primary care physician and say, hey, look, my tonsils are swollen and I can't talk. Whatever the situation was, medical or dental, I just didn't feel that it was the right thing for me to do, because I had other options. So I didn't use the VA. Again, some of it had to do with just the bureaucracy, but mainly it was because there's like a lot of guys that need the VA, and I'm not going to take a spot or a minute or an appointment from those guys. Simple as that.
So going back to the transition piece, after the transition, so you were in law enforcement and then retired, and then what have you been doing since then? Have you been kind of on the same path that you've been on, or what do you do? What are you up to now?
Pretty much. So when I finally, I went through an academy, put myself through an academy. This is another interesting, if we got the time. I went through the academy, was in the top 3 of my class at my age. And the average age was like 23, 24. But I had a medical file that followed me. So even though I graduated in the top of the class, was medically cleared when I was given an offer from one of the agencies. After the offer, I had to disclose my entire VA file, and I was brought in for a secondary medical examination, which I passed, but they said because of my file, I would be a liability medically. So I went through a brief period of thinking about fighting that. And I was told by several of my mentors in the academy, instructors, staff, sergeants, and they said, don't do it. You're going to get picked up somewhere. Don't let this bureaucratic crap, be the end of your career. You're going to find a place. So I shotgunned a bunch of resumes and applications out there. And I got picked up by 5 other agencies. And so I picked one. I had a very great career with this agency. I had a very short training period. I was immediately put on the SWAT team because of my previous experience. And I spent 15 years with them as an operator and as their primary instructor, training them. And then when I retired from law enforcement, I stayed on as a consultant for a brief period. When I left the law enforcement community, it was it was a time of my choosing, but it was kind of driven by the social climate at the time. And I think we're all aware of what's going on today and how that's going. So it was an easy move for me. I was eligible to retire. I'd done 15 years. And I had built a relationship with an individual, a professional athlete who had been diagnosed with ALS. And we were best friends. He wanted me to take care of him through his transition, his period. And I agreed. It was the perfect opportunity for me to cut ties with the law enforcement community as an officer, and move on to something different, a new purpose, so to speak. So I did that. Just before I'd done that, though, I had contemplated leaving the law enforcement community, and I had a couple friends, colleagues that I'd worked with. One was a just about to retire FBI SWAT team leader. And we discussed, where do we go from here? What do we do? And we thought, well, maybe we should take our experience, 30 years plus, and apply that to what we do currently, only in the civilian market, which is training law enforcement. So he started his company a couple of years before I started mine. We both started a tactical training company to train law enforcement in mainly SWAT teams, special weapons and tactics. And that's what I've been doing since then. I branched out my company a little bit to incorporate some civilian training, given the things that have happened over the last couple of years. But primarily that's what I've done. So I've transitioned fairly seamlessly from the SEAL team to law enforcement to a professional career in the civilian market.
What have been some of the biggest struggles that you've faced starting your own business and going into that realm?
The biggest struggle, fear.
Fear?
Yeah.
How so?
And that might sound kind of strange coming from any, combat veteran, to be honest, but, from, somebody that was in the SEAL team, or a SWAT officer to say, I was afraid of, it was fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of it not working. Just, there was a lot of anxiety and apprehension over, I had a great thing going with the SWAT team that I was on and what I was teaching them. And I had a great reputation and relationship within our industry in many other agencies. But does that necessarily translate into, okay, you're the guy now that can provide this kind of expertise and instruction statewide? So there was a little bit of fear and apprehension in that. Would it succeed? Would it fail? And the last thing any of us want to do is fail at anything. Fail at a mission, fail at a PT test, fail at anything. So, that fear of failure, that was my biggest apprehension. But it was also the biggest motivating factor because it was a challenge. And again, I revert back to my training in the military and my days in BUDS. There wasn't a day in BUDS training that I wasn't afraid that I was going to quit or fail or be kicked out. I knew I was going to, I wanted this, I was never going to quit, but we all face those demons and realizations at some point in our lives, and when you face those, it becomes reality. So when you face your fears, and that was kind of the thing for me, facing that fear. How do we do it? How do I do it?
So what was the one thing that you gained from your military service in training to help you get through that fear? Is there anything specific?
Never quit.
I mean, it's kind of a quick, never quit. It's kind of a funny question to ask a Navy SEAL. Yeah.
Never quit, no matter what. I mean, one of the things that was to my benefit was I had some time in the SEAL community as an instructor, as a training supervisor. So, and I'd learned from some of the best. So being able to sell your message, to pass on your philosophies, and get a buy-in from the people that you're teaching, is the key. If you don't have that, you're just a guy that's barking out a bunch of crap and taking their money. For the most part, that's it. You've got a product to sell. Who gives a shit whether it works? I'm getting paid, But I had the distinct privilege and honor of working with some of the best in our nation. When it came to leadership, when it came to instructors, when it came to mentorship, organization, structure, accountability, and I just applied all those principles. And it really doesn't matter whether, you were in the SEAL team, you were, in the Air Force, the Coast Guard, you were in the Marine Corps in whatever capacity, because there's so many now. In the Army, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We all are driven by the same basic principles of, honor and code and duty and work ethic, that never quit mentality.
Mm-hmm.
At least the warriors and the ones that have made the difference and counted. So we all share that, and every veteran that's leaving their service now can apply that same principle into the civilian world, into the private sector. That work ethic, that drive, that organizational skill, the leadership, huge. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get that kind of experience coming out of college.
Right.
Simple. You take a guy that spent 4 years with no college experience, that spent 4 years, in a rifle company, in a special operations community. They don't need 4 years of college to know how to motivate, to lead, to inspire people, and to organize things so that they succeed. To take a group of individuals, form a team, give them common goals, and point them in the right direction to make them succeed. It's huge. I think every person, regardless of where they served, has that ability. They just need to tap into it. Figure out what your passion is, and go in that direction. My passion was, quite frankly, when I left the military, was not in medicine. It was in protecting others. It was in facing evil. It was in being that barrier between, predators and prey. And law enforcement seemed to be the thing that filled that void for me. And when I left the law enforcement community, it was, well, what can I do to be a force multiplier, to mentor and make those individuals, especially now in that industry, in that community, be trusted again, be seen as professionals, be seen as the sheepdog, the guardian, and not the person to be feared. And so that's what I try and do now, with my company, with the way that we train. We've been pretty successful doing that.
It's interesting when you're talking about purpose and what is your mission in life? What's at the core? What do you want to do? How do you want to contribute? I think that, it's easy for a young man or woman who joins the military to not really know when they're joining, but there's a service aspect to it. And then as they're growing through their service and they're kind of, opening up their minds to different things, and then transition, I've talked to a lot of folks too that, they got these great opportunities because they served, and a lot of them will chase money, right? They'll take a job that, might offer them the most amount, and they go and they do that and they aren't fulfilled. I was talking to a good buddy who he worked for a really big company, and he made a lot of money, basically the equivalent of two regular people, and he was chasing the dollar and just wasn't fulfilled. It was like every day driving to work, he's spending an hour and a half in the car away from his family, and was it worth it? And it wasn't filling that bucket of his purpose, and he just quit. And now he and opened up another door, and he's doing something now that is filling his purpose. And it can look like a bunch of different things. You say helping people and protecting people and things like that. There's a lot of different jobs that you can do that fills that bucket, right?
Absolutely.
I think that we are so quick to try and figure something out when we're transitioning, and we got to figure it out. We have to do it for the rest of our life, and then that's it. But if it's not filling that bucket, pivot and do something else, and I think that your story is a testament to that, right? I mean, you wanted to be in the medical field, and then, but in your core, it was helping people, protecting people, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's, for me, that's kind of been my, my purpose, my passion, I guess, is, to be that kind of person. But look at the challenges that we have today as a country. And I say today in particular, we have a supply chain issue. You can't tell me that there aren't a buttload of individuals that are thinking about separating from the military, or that have separated from the military, that can't provide those kind of infrastructure jobs. That's what they were in the military to do. And if that's still their passion, if that's still what they want to do, that's an untapped market. Again, the medical profession, which is starting to hurt. The law enforcement, you can pick one in today's society. Quite frankly, right now, other than politicians, where you want to serve. Service doesn't stop when you leave the military. It just depends on whether you continue to serve others, or you transition to just serving yourself. And there are those. There are some that will just serve themselves. there's nothing wrong with putting yourself first. Yourself and your family come before anything else. They should. Unless you're in a position, which most of us were, in the military. But once you leave the military, that it kind of changes. You can still be of service to your community. You can still be of service to your neighbor, and take care of your family. And quite frankly, you can be there with your family because you're not on a 6-month deployment or a 13-month deployment. You're not getting shot at anymore. There's so much that you can do. But I think that's kind of the key is when you're thinking about leaving, or it's time to leave, or you're being forced out. Okay, if your purpose, like mine was specific, you need to reinvent yourself. You need to find another purpose. You need to find something else that's passionate to you, that fills you with gratification. Not outside gratification and accolades, but something that feeds your soul. And it should be something that monetarily and fiscally feeds your family and takes care of you. There is no reason why any veteran leaving the military can't do that, quite frankly. The ones that don't need our help, because for whatever reason, they don't have the ability to motivate themselves, or they're in an emotional or mental crisis that needs intervention. Beyond that, there isn't any reason any veteran can't succeed, and succeed well beyond what they did in the military. It's there. You may have to navigate some muddy waters, but that's what the military teaches you. That's what being a veteran is all about, is overcoming adversity. It's looking outside the box. It's forging your own path in some circumstances. It's your ability to inspire, to lead, to innovate. That's what veterans are. They're unique. They are unique. And they should be revered. And before I forget, I just want to say personally thank you to every veteran out there that has served, especially in the last 20 years. Your sacrifice does not go unnoticed by those of us that appreciate it the most. And it's a debt that will never be repaid in full measure by this country. It just won't. But we didn't do it for the money. And we didn't do it for the accolades and the recognition. That's why they call it a volunteer service. You did it because you had a calling, you had a purpose, you had a passion. And that's why you're a veteran. So thank you.
Very true.
Thank you.
So what would be some advice that you would give those young hard chargers out there right now that are getting ready to transition and moving forward?
Well, if you have the ability to get a little extra education, in your time off, or, when you're on some shore duty and you're not deployed, I would say do it. Knowledge is power. So the more that you can educate yourself, whether it's going to formal college, online or whatever, or a trade school, anything to do that. Look at where you want to be in 5 years and make a plan to get there. Have some goals, set some goals, make a plan and a pathway to get there. And also understand that, you have to build in some flexibility and some off ramps. Look at where you want to be in 10 years, The last thing you want to do is wake up when you're 55 years old, full of regrets, with no plan for the future. And at that point, who cares? So embrace the service that you gave to this country. Take full advantage of whatever the military has to offer you. When you're transitioning to get out, take full advantage of everything that the VA has to offer. It's a lot better now than it was 30 years ago. It's a lot better now than it was 20 years ago. The educational opportunities, the business opportunities, being a veteran-owned business entity is huge. It's huge. It's a badge of honor. So use it. If you're going to be a small business owner, use that. If you're going to go into the private sector in a whatever environment, pump up your military resume because it means something. Your ability to provide leadership, mentorship, critical thinking in crisis is huge. You don't get that in college. Okay, so sell that. Employers and business owners are looking for that a lot harder now as a force multiplier than they are with the college degree. You get somebody that was in middle management in the military, i.e., non-commissioned officer, senior enlisted. That's huge. So those things transfer a lot more than they did before. But I think if I were to give anybody any advice when they are thinking about leaving or they're being forced to leave, if you can't pursue what you're passionate about, find another passion. Life is ever evolving, so you can't get stuck in the same rut forever. You're not going to leave the military a wealthy individual, so you can't just sit back in your laurels and well, this is it. If your passion was this, subject A, and you're no longer able to do that for whatever reason in the military, if you can't continue to do that in the private sector, then find a new passion. Find something that inspires you to get up every morning and go to work.
Some great advice. Some good advice there. Well, Rick, it's been a pleasure having you on tonight. I truly appreciate your time. Thank you for your service, and continue to serve in the way that you do that through your business and talking to other people and being here tonight and sharing your advice and your stories. So truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Pat, thank you again for your service. And again, thank you to all you veterans who serve this country with great honor and distinction. We all appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us tonight, and we hope you got some value from this episode. If you're not already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave us a comment. Also, head over to our YouTube channel for additional content. Just search The Everyday Veteran. If you'd like to be a guest or have a topic you want us to cover, email us at everydayveteran1775@gmail.com. That's everydayveteran1775@gmail.com. Or hit us up on Facebook at Everyday Veteran. I will also leave links in the description below. Semper Fi.